that's something you're into, hit that subscribe button and ding ding ding, ring the notification bell. You're actually getting another tutorial this week, and today we're going to be learning how to make I Spy jars. These are quick and easy to make, and it's an activity that your children or your students can get involved with as well. Now, you have probably seen these for sale with big box education retailers. However, some of these I Spy jars can go anywhere from $20 to upwards of $50 depending on the size of the jar and the items that are inside of it. You can save a lot of money if you make these yourself, and it's more fun if you get the kids involved anyways. In this episode, I am going to show you how to make the I Spy jar. I'm going to be talking about alternative jar or bottle types that you can use, as well as types and alternatives for fill materials and items that can go in the jar as well. I'm going to talk about how you would make these jars in person with students, as well as ideas for doing this in a virtual classroom environment. All right, let's get right into it. Let's start off by just talking about what the I Spy jar is. It's a jar that you can play different types of I Spy games with, depending on what you put in the jar. For example, I love putting letter beads in my I Spy jars, so I tend to use them as a letter recognition activity. However, you don't have to use them that way. Another way that I've seen them used is as a calming jar. So you could use it as an educational activity, you could use it as a calming jar, but you could also use them as something to keep children busy when you are on a long car ride, or you are on a long bus or train ride, or in the grocery store. There are a lot of different applications for these I Spy jars. And overall, they're just fun. So that's the most important thing. There are three main components to our I Spy jar. So the vessel, what you're putting your items into, the fill, and your I Spy items. So in these jars that I have made, the fill is a mixture of rice and clear crafting beads. I believe they are mainly used for vase arrangements or vase arrangements, and also in homemade bean bags and Beanie Babies. However, you don't have to use rice and you don't have to use vase filler. The jar that I have used here are craft jars. I think they come in a pack of 4 and they're sold at Dollarama. I find that they arrive, we lost a water bottle, every once in a while, and they get scooped up really quickly. However, you could definitely order something like this on Amazon or through a lot of other craft retailers. I find that these jars, first off, they're plastic, so you don't have to worry about glass breaking, and they're quite sturdy. I have never had a child break one of these craft jars. However, you may prefer to use recycled materials, and that's honestly the better option anyways. So you have a few different choices, and what you choose is really going to come down to preference. So you can use glass jars, and especially if you get, I don't know if you can see here, ones with like the measurements or the words on the glass after you take off the label, it will look just beautiful. However, you do run the risk of glass breaking, so that's going to depend on the child as well as the setting that it's being made in. You could just use your standard old water bottle from the recycling bin. Students may be bringing these from home, or you may be doing this at home with your own child. A lot of people do not like these because of the ribs on the side. It's a less aesthetically pleasing appearance, and I can't stand that sound, and they will have a scratched appearance more quickly. They do not last as long. Now, some water bottles have different appearances, and then pop bottles as well. This isn't the best example, but some of your more fancy water bottles will be more of a perfect cylinder or maybe a rectangular prism, and they'll be a thicker plastic as well, and they'll look nicer. As well as pop bottles, so I don't have an example of a full-size pop bottle here, but a full-size pop bottle is an entirely different experience, a much bigger I Spy jar, which is pretty cool. All right, let's talk about filler. So as I said earlier, my filler for these particular jars is just rice and these little tiny vase filler beads. However, you definitely don't have to use that. You have quite a few different options. So if you don't mind using food for activities and crafts, you can use dried rice, little dried beans, and dried pasta. However, if you prefer not to use food items in your craft and in your activities, totally respect that. The vase filler may be a better option for you. Or you could use tiny beads, colored sand, sequins as well. There are quite a few different things you can choose from. The type of filler you're going to choose to use will depend on you, your preferences, as well as the setting in which you are making your I Spy jar. The next thing you'll want to think about is what type of items you want to put in your I Spy jar. So this is where you can get really creative, or where your child or students can get really creative. I guess it really depends on your preference, as well as what you're going to use your I Spy jars for. So if you want to use these for learning centers, which I'll explain a little bit more in depth a little later on, maybe you specifically want to use letter beads or number beads. Or if it's purely for a fun activity, something to carry with you in the car, something to keep in the cubby as a calming device, you may want to use other materials. So you could use tiny pom-poms, sequins, beads, items found naturally in the environment, so tiny pine cones, tiny sticks, tiny pebbles. You could use small objects found around the home. Some people choose to buy tiny little figurines to put in their I Spy jar. So again, it completely depends on the purpose and what you are going for with your I Spy jar. Let's kind of get into different ways you can use the I Spy jar, and then that will help us to think a little bit more about the types of materials that we might want to put in them. As I was mentioning earlier, you could definitely use these for learning centers. Let's say your students are working on letter recognition. You could have these at a center available to use with small letter beads and maybe other items as well inside of them. Students could then copy down the letters that they see. As the school year progresses and as they are starting to work on different skills, you could change up the purpose of the activity. So for example, you find the letter F, you write down 3 words that start with the letter F. Expand it further. They have to find letters in the jar that they can put together to create words that they have learned how to spell. Cat, dog, bed. Completely depending on where your students are at and what you're learning, what an easy tool for differentiation. Because you could have some students working on copying down the letters and some students working on making words. Of course, this will work with number beads as well. Maybe students are just copying down the numbers that they're finding in the I Spy jar, but maybe some students are adding the numbers together that they're finding in the I Spy jar. Maybe they're adding 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 digits. They can take it as far as they want to. Another activity that I've seen these jars used for, especially if you're using like maybe a bigger pop bottle sized I Spy jar, is letter matchup activities. So for example, you could have a page with your letters of the alphabet A through Z and have items that start with those letters in the jar. Of course, this gets tricky with some of your XYZ letters, but that's where some people get creative and perhaps they print off a small image and laminate it with a thick layer of plastic and then kind of guard the edges with tape. You might do that. Or some people buy small little tinker toys and trinkets that match up with those letters to add to the jar. It depends on how creative and fancy you want to get with it. I haven't done that because that seems like a lot of work. I've mostly just stuck with letters and numbers and then small crafty items. This is a wonderful activity to do in class with your young students. There are a few different ways you could definitely set it up. You could have communal tables where students are choosing the amount of rice, maybe of colored rice, they're choosing the color that's going into their jar. Maybe they're getting to choose what items to spy that they're going to put in the jar. Maybe, especially in the age of COVID, what you may want to do if you're in class and doing this activity is you may have students just look and communicate to you which items they're going to want in the jar. then you with tongs can add it to a tray and they take it to their table and do it that way, or they're picking out the items ahead of time and then that way they can be prepared for individual use. This activity could definitely be used in your virtual classroom. So of course you're going to want to be much more flexible in planning this, because this is going to depend upon the materials and items that are available to each family. So these really cute little craft bottles are not going to be realistic for our families. We don't want them to feel like they need to go out and buy something like that. A water bottle or a pop bottle, maybe even a juice jug actually, would be a more reasonable option for our families. Find something from the recycling bin that you can use. And then in terms of filler, you'll also want to kind of be aware of what is going to be appropriate. So maybe the rice or the beans are not going to be appropriate for your families, but maybe sand, small rocks, maybe those items are going to be much more easily accessible for your families. Again, you'll just have to be aware of the circumstances surrounding your students. And if it's not appropriate to do with your students in the virtual classroom environment, they won't have the support to do that from a parent. Maybe hold off until you're back and in person again. So next I'm going to put an I Spy jar together here with you. So I'm going to start off by putting my filler in the jar. So my filler, again, is rice and vase filler beads. And it's getting everywhere. With students, I would love them to use their hands, or they could be using a spoon, or maybe deeply inset tongs. There are a bunch of different ways that you could do this. Apparently I'm doing this the hard way though. Oh, a funnel. Wouldn't that be fun to do this with a funnel? You don't want to fill your jar all the way, because then there won't be any room for your filler to move around within the jar, and then you can't do the activity. You can't start buying the items because there just isn't enough movement. Really, you only need to fill it like 3/4 of the way. Next, I'm going to add some letter beads. Now, these are just the uppercase letter beads that I believe I got at Dollar Tree. However, I would love to get lowercase and uppercase letters and have the child notice the difference between the letters as they find them, or to even do one with numbers and letters and have the child notice the difference between numbers and letters. However, this is what I have right now, and everything's in lockdown, so it's not like I would be going out to buy different items anyways. Okay, I have my letter beads. I'm going to add my mini pom-poms. These are just so cute and little. And I think I will add a little bit more rice. That's the beauty of these. You can add as much or as little of each item as you want. When doing this with students, you will want to glue the lid on, because no one wants a sea of rice flooding their classroom or flooding their home. You want to glue that baby on so that this thing is secured tight. All right, let's shake it up and mix our items in. However, I'm gonna stop here because there is an old heart sticker that made its way in here and it's nasty. You could definitely take some little stickers and put them on cardboard or another hard surface and then cut them out and add some really cool shapes in that way. That would be super fun. Just not old, disgusting stickers with dirt on the other side. My cat is looking at me like he is shocked by this sound. Okay, there we go. There's our I Spy jar. I see the letter H. I see the letter K. I see a black pom-pom. And you know what? You could add a lot less I Spy items to the jar than what I did. And it would make the game more difficult, more challenging, and perhaps more interesting for an older child, as opposed to adding a lot of items for a younger child. Again, totally your preference or the preference of the child adding the items to the jar. Okay, that is the end of our tutorial. I hope that you're able to use this either in your classroom or maybe just at home with your own child. I have always loved making I Spy jars. I think it's a fun activity to get the kids involved in, and then they can go ahead and use these items purely for entertainment or for learning in the classroom. Thank you for visiting me again this week on Paragon of Play. I hope to see you next week, which will be a podcast episode week. And of course, I hope that you can subscribe if you haven't already and give this episode a like. Also, I would love for you to comment down below and let me know if you have made these before or if you've made them a different way. Maybe you've used a jar or bottle type that I haven't thought of. I would love to hear your ideas down below so that maybe next year when I do these again, I can find a different way to do them, or maybe anyone else reading the comments can get some different ideas as well. All right, have a good night, day, or weekend wherever you are or whatever you're doing, and I'll see you later. Bye.